author's note. While 1/20/2025, The Day America Dies is a work of fiction, its themes touch upon very real concerns in today's world. This novel aims not just to entertain, but also to shed light on the potential consequences of open borders and the complexities of international espionage. The revelation of secret Chinese jails operating in America, as depicted in this story, is rooted in truth. These facilities, although not widely publicized, raise serious questions about sovereignty and human rights. The exact number of such jails and their detainees remains unclear, but their existence underscores the intricate, often hidden, dynamics of global power play. It's my hope that this story provides not only a thrilling read, but also encourages readers to think more deeply about these critical issues. Preface. In the early hours of a crisp January morning in 2025, the world as we knew it was quietly shifting on its axis. Beneath the bustling streets of Washington, D.C., in the shadows of monuments that have silently witnessed the rise and fall of ideals and regimes, a conspiracy was brewing, a plan so audacious, so intricate, that it threatened to unravel the very fabric of our nation. This is not a story of war in the traditional sense, nor is it a tale of heroes and villains as clearly defined as black and white. Here, in the corridors of power and the forgotten alleys of our cities, a different kind of battle was being waged. One that didn't require armies or weapons, but the most dangerous tool of all: information. As the nation prepared for the inauguration of a president, promising a new era of transparency and change, little did they know that forces from within and beyond our borders were orchestrating a symphony of chaos. Their instruments? Our own vulnerabilities, the cracks in our society, our blind trust in technology, and our unshakable belief in the strength of our institutions. This is a story of resilience in the face of invisible enemies, of alliances forged in the darkest hours, and of the thin line between order and anarchy. It is about the men and women who found themselves at the crossroads of history, making choices that would define not just their lives, but the future of our nation. As you turn these pages, remember that while this is a work of fiction, the shadows it explores are very real. The events that unfold are a mosaic of possibilities, a warning of what could be if we dare to look away from the truth for too long. In the end, this is more than just a story. It is a reflection of our times, a mirror held up to the face of a society on the brink. It asks one fundamental question, a question as old as civilization itself. What happens when the very foundations of trust and truth we rely on start to crumble? Chapter 1, Unseen Threads. January 18th, 2025, Washington, D.C. The city was a hive of activity, a frenetic blend of anticipation and anxiety as the presidential inauguration loomed. Flags fluttered on lampposts, and security was tighter than it had ever been. Amidst the patriotic displays, FBI agent Elizabeth Shaw moved through the crowd, her keen eyes missing nothing. She was a seasoned agent, her instincts honed by years in the field. But today, something felt different. Elizabeth's phone buzzed, a text from her partner, Agent Mike Donovan. "Meet me at the corner of 6th and Constitution. Urgent." No further explanation, but none was needed. In their line of work, urgent meant just that. As Elizabeth made her way, she couldn't shake off the unease that had settled in her since morning. The city was a labyrinth of potential threats, every face in the crowd a possible danger. Yet it was the unseen threats, the ones lurking in the shadows of data and digital footprints, that worried her most. She found Mike waiting, his expression grim. "We've got a situation," he said without preamble. "Intel just came in about a potential cyber threat targeting the inauguration. They think it's a decoy for something bigger." Elizabeth's mind raced. A decoy meant a diversion, something to draw their attention while the real attack happened elsewhere. But where? And what form would it take? As they hurried back to the field office, the city's festive air felt increasingly ominous. The streets were filled with people celebrating democracy, unaware of the invisible webs being spun around them. Elizabeth knew that their job was to untangle those webs to prevent the unseen from becoming a catastrophic reality. But as she walked, a chilling thought struck her. What if this time they were already too late? Chapter 2. Precise Chaos. January 20th, 2025, 1:20 a.m., sleep Sleeper cells activate nationwide. In the pre-dawn stillness, a digital pulse activated sleeper cells across the nation. At 1:20 a.m., the message was clear and cold. Proceed at 1:20 p.m. An intricate plan, years in the making, was set into motion. As daylight broke, the nation stirred, oblivious to the undercurrent of conspiracy that was about to turn a day of national pride into one of unprecedented chaos. January 20th, 2025, 1:20 p.m., Washington, D.C. presidential inauguration. The inauguration ceremony, a vibrant display of democracy, is suddenly upended. As the clock strikes 1:20 p.m., chaos erupts. Secret Service agents, with practiced precision and urgency, swiftly encircle the president. They navigate through the startled crowd, moving him towards the armored sanctuary of the Beast. The air is thick with confusion and the murmur of panic as the ceremony dissolves into disarray. Once safely inside the vehicle, the president receives his first urgent crisis briefing. An aide outlines the unimaginable scale of the attacks. Simultaneous prison breaks and tanker explosions across the nation, each executed with chilling precision at the very moment of the inauguration. The situation is unprecedented, Mr. President, the aide says, voice steady despite the unfolding crisis. We're still assessing the full extent, but it's clear this was a coordinated attack, timed for maximum impact. As the Beast speeds towards the safety of the White House, the new president grapples with the reality of a nation under siege on what was to be a day of celebration. The weight of leadership has never felt so heavy, nor so immediate. 1:20 p.m., maximum security prison, Washington, D.C. Simultaneously, as the clock struck 1:20 p.m., a series of orchestrated attacks launched. The ground shook at the Washington, D.C. maximum security prison, explosions tearing through its fortified walls. Amidst the debris, heavily armed figures emerged, their movements precise, their intentions lethal. In the heart of the chaos, a notorious inmate was cornered. "Swear allegiance to Allah first," demanded a masked assailant, weapon poised. What? The inmate's confusion was palpable, his survival instinct kicking in. He would say anything to get the hell out of there. "Swear allegiance to Allah first," the command repeated, unyielding. In a moment of desperate pragmatism, the inmate retorted, "I'll swear allegiance to yo mama for a gun." The demand was made once more, unwavering. Finally, the inmate acquiesced, a reluctant allegiance spoken. He was handed a weapon, a temporary ally in a plan far bigger than any of them. Across the nation. As the prison walls in Washington, D.C. crumbled, a synchronized wave of chaos rippled across the country. At precisely 1:20 p.m., the same minute the inauguration was poised to begin, 120 prisons nationwide experienced breaches of an unprecedented scale. In a display of chilling coordination, each prison was hit simultaneously. Explosions shattered the monotony of prison life, walls were breached, and security systems were rendered ineffective in moments. Armed figures, part of the sleeper cells, emerged from the shadows. They moved with purpose, selectively freeing inmates according to a carefully crafted plan. The scenes were chaotic, yet calculated. In one prison after another, the same scenario played out. Guards were overwhelmed, control rooms seized, and inmates, some dangerous and others victims of circumstance, spilled into the open, their shackles broken. This orchestrated prison breakout was a masterstroke in a larger plan. It was designed not just to free the inmates, but to send shockwaves through the nation's law enforcement and judicial systems. Each breakout served as a distraction, a piece of a larger puzzle that was slowly coming together to form a picture of terror and anarchy. The nation, already focused on the inauguration, was forced to split its attention. Law enforcement agencies scrambled to respond to the simultaneous emergencies, stretching their resources thin. The scale and precision of the attacks were unlike anything they had encountered before. Destruction, the magnitude of the threat became clear. It wasn't just an attack on specific locations, it was an assault on the very structure and order of the nation. Chapter 3, A Nation Under Siege, January 20th, 2025. Across the United States at 1:20 p.m., as the nation's eyes were fixed on the inauguration, a series of catastrophic events began to unfold simultaneously across the United States, painting a picture of a country under siege. First, the prison breaks. 120 federal and state prisons nationwide erupted into chaos as walls crumbled and inmates poured into the surrounding areas. This alone would have been a national crisis, but it was just the beginning. Almost at the same moment, major cities experienced crippling cyber attacks, causing blackouts and bringing essential services to a standstill. Reports came flooding in of massive fires and environmental disasters happening at the very exact moment. Major cities experienced crippling cyber attacks and bringing essential services to a standstill. As the news streamed in from around the country, a troubling picture emerged. This was not a series of unfortunate events. It was a coordinated assault, striking at the heart of American stability and security. Across the United States, the enormity of the situation was only beginning to sink in. In every major city, from the East Coast to the West, emergency services were overwhelmed. The FBI, along with local law enforcement, scrambled to respond to the simultaneous crises. In Washington, D.C., Agent Shaw watched the reports flooding in. The prison breaks had unleashed some of the most dangerous individuals back into society, while the cyber attacks crippled critical infrastructure, creating a perfect storm of chaos and fear. As Shaw processed the information, her phone buzzed. A trusted contact in Texas had alarming news. A high-ranking official in the governor's office had been flagged in a recent intercept. The content was vague, but it suggested a connection to the day's events. 4. The Mole, 6 months prior, Washington, D.C. Congressman Richard Delgado stepped off the podium amid resounding applause. His persuasive speech on migrant rights had captivated the audience. As the hall emptied, a cryptic voice on his phone said simply, 120. Delgado understood the code. 120 migrants, strategically chosen, were at the border awaiting transport to predetermined locations across America for future activation. Present-day Mercy General Hospital, Dallas, Texas. Chaos reigned at Mercy General Hospital. Ambulances rushed in one after another, each unloading more victims. Amidst this pandemonium, a mysterious figure entered, coughing violently and clutching a blood-soaked bandana. Unbeknownst to the hospital staff, this patient was carrying a swift-acting virus developed by Chinese scientists, showing symptoms within an hour and leading to death in 3. Designed for rapid impact, but with only a 5% mortality rate, this virus was meant to sow immediate chaos and confusion. As she moved through the emergency room, a sinister clock was ticking, marking the spread of a new, terrifying aspect of the day's attack on America. Virus 120. Shadows of Yesterday and Today, 6 months ago. At the U.S.-Mexico border, a reporter stood against a backdrop of long lines and weary faces. This is Emily Torres, reporting live from the border, where an unusual situation is unfolding. For the first time, we're seeing a significant number of Chinese immigrants among the usual crowd, she announced, her tone a mix of curiosity and concern. The camera panned over the crowd, highlighting families huddled together, their belongings meager, their expressions a blend of hope and apprehension. As the camera continued to survey the scene, it caught glimpses of the migrants receiving supplies from aid workers as they crossed the border. Among the essential items, each individual was handed a new cell phone, a lifeline for those disconnected from their past lives. However, for a select few, these phones served a different purpose. In the crowd, several individuals discreetly activated their new phones. They texted a number they had committed to memory. 120, it said. After sending the message, they waited with a sense of purpose, their eyes fixed on the screens for a response that would set the next phase of their plan in motion. One migrant's gaze fixed on a group getting water from a yellow igloo cooler. I wouldn't drink that, he thought, with vengeance in his heart. Chapter 6. Echoes of Crisis. 6 months ago, U.S.-Mexico border, an immigrant woman, weary from her journey, accidentally tripped, shattering a small vial labeled in a foreign script. She stared in horror as she knew immediately the direness of her mistake. The contents, known to her only as Virus 120, would begin to work within the hour. Then its lethal work would begin. Present day, Mercy General Hospital, Dallas, Texas. In the crowded emergency room of Mercy General Hospital, Agent Shaw listened intently as a doctor updated her. The symptoms are rapid and severe, and it's highly contagious, We're estimating a significant fatality rate if it spreads unchecked, he explained, his voice tinged with urgency. Before Shaw could respond, another doctor barged in, waving a sheaf of papers. 6 months ago, same symptoms, he announced breathlessly. The room went silent as he delivered the chilling news. The patient and 12 others, all dead. This revelation added a harrowing dimension to the crisis, merging past and present into a single, ominous narrative. As the weight of the doctor's words settled in, Shaw's investigative instincts kicked into high gear. Illegal Chinese immigrant incident occurred 12 miles from the border, she murmured, piecing the puzzle together. A realization dawned upon her. The open border was being exploited for these nefarious activities. She quickly pulled out her phone, dialing her superior. Sir, it's Shaw. The virus. It's linked to an incident 6 months ago involving a Chinese immigrant near the border. It seems they're using the open border policy to their advantage. Her voice was steady, but the implication of her findings was clear. This was a well-orchestrated plot, leveraging national vulnerabilities. Chapter 8. The Hidden Hand. Tehran, Iran, under the veil of night, a nondescript building in the heart of Tehran buzzed with covert activity. Inside, a dimly lit room echoed with hushed tones of Farsi, Mandarin, and Russian. 3 figures, each representing the clandestine interests of their nations, sat around an ancient oak table, maps and digital displays casting an eerie glow on their faces. General Amir Hossein, Iran's shadow commander, his eyes piercing and calculating, spoke first. The prisons have fallen, he began, his voice a blend of pride and gravity. Our soldiers executed the breaches with precision, unleashing chaos across the American landscape. Xiang Li, China's intelligence chief, nodded in approval. Excellent. The disarray complements our Virus 120. America is reeling. Dmitry Volkov, a Russian cyber warfare strategist, interjected. Our digital strikes have crippled their networks, Dmitry informs his friends, but not effectively disabling them. Li pointed out, Victor must get that chip back. The conversation turned strategic, each representative outlining the broader impact of their efforts. General Hossein detailed the recruitment of specific inmates, skilled in various illicit trades, now indebted to their liberators and a valuable asset for future operations. The American response is fragmented, Xiang Li observed. Their focus inward, their global influence wanes. Volkov leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. We must capitalize on this moment. The next phase of our plan must be bolder, more decisive. As they plotted, the walls around them, adorned with ancient tapestries, seemed to absorb their words, holding centuries of secrets within their threads. The meeting concluded with a silent agreement, a shared vision of a reshaped world order, one where the once mighty United States grappled with a threat it never saw coming. Chapter 9. The second wave, 1 to 18 a.m. Washington, D.C. As the clock neared 1:20 a.m., the nation, already reeling from the day's horrors, braced unknowingly for the second wave of the meticulously orchestrated attack. In the dimly lit FBI command center, a sense of urgency hung in the air as operators scrambled to understand the scope of the crisis. The commander, a figure of authority and concern, turned to his team asking, "Can we stop a total blackout?" The lead technician, fingers flying over a keyboard in a desperate bid to bypass the cyber attack, replied without looking up, "We'll try, but this is sophisticated beyond anything we've seen." Their voices, tinged with determination and uncertainty, echoed the gravity of the situation as they faced the daunting task of preventing a nationwide digital collapse. Across the country, 120 critical sites, from Silicon Valley data centers to New York's communication hubs, were hit simultaneously, plunging the nation into darkness. The streets, lit only by the moon, echoed with the sound of confusion and fear. It was as if the haunting refrain of "The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia" had come to life, playing out across a nation now shrouded in uncertainty and apprehension. Chapter 10. The Interrupted Chase. The streets of Washington, D.C. were a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty, a perfect backdrop for the cat-and-mouse game unfolding under the cloak of night. Michael, with a blend of desperation and determination, was hot on the heels of Viktor Kozlov. Every sense was heightened, his focus narrowed to the figure darting ahead of him, always just out of reach. Victor moved with the agility of a man who knew he was running for his life, slipping through alleys and vaulting over obstacles. Michael matched him step for step, fueled by a burning need to protect his sister. The chase was not just a pursuit, it was a personal crusade. As they weaved through the dimly lit streets, Michael's mind flashed back to his sister's laughter, to the promises they made to always look out for each other. It was this bond, this unspoken vow, that drove him forward, pushing his body beyond its limits. The chase led them to a deserted construction site, an eerie maze of steel and concrete. Victor, sensing an opportunity to lose his pursuer, darted into the skeleton of the building. Michael followed without hesitation, his footsteps echoing in the hollow space. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the shadows, her FBI badge glinting in the moonlight. It was Agent Shaw, her gun drawn, her eyes scanning the scene. She had been tracking a lead on the prison breaks, unaware she was about to intersect with a much larger story. "Freeze!" she commanded, her voice slicing through the silence. Michael, mere feet away from Victor, came to an abrupt halt, his focus shattered. He turned, hands raised, to face the agent, his expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. Victor seized the moment, disappearing into the darkness of the construction site. Michael's chance to end it, to capture the man who threatened his sister, had slipped through his fingers. Agent Shaw, trained to assess quickly, noticed the raw determination in Michael's eyes, a look that spoke of more than just a fugitive's desperation. There was a story here, a complex web that she had just become a part of. Chapter 11: A Tenuous Alliance. In the eerie quiet of the construction site, under the harsh glare of temporary lights, the standoff between Agent Elizabeth Shaw and Michael reached a critical point. Shaw's weapon, though still drawn, had lowered slightly, her sharp gaze assessing Michael's intent and desperation. "Why are you chasing Viktor Kozlov?" Shaw's voice, firm and authoritative, echoed against the steel and concrete. Michael, his breath steadying from the adrenaline of the chase, countered with equal intensity. "And why is the FBI after him? What's your stake in this? We were state prisoners, not feds." Shaw, recognizing a shared urgency in Michael's tone, conceded a fragment of the truth. After his escape, Victor's been targeting specific individuals, executing a vendetta. He's already killed the judge and prosecutor from his trial. "What about you?" Shaw asked. "He took your honey bun on store day." Michael's expression darkened. "He's going after my sister," he admitted, the words heavy with a mix of fear and resolve. "She was on the bus, the one where Victor was arrested after killing a man. She testified against him. She could be next." The revelation shifted the dynamics in the cold, open space. Shaw, trained to remain impassive, couldn't help but recognize the personal, painful stakes driving Michael. She holstered her gun, her decision marking a pivotal turn in their encounter. "Your sister is in danger, and you might be the key to stopping Victor before he strikes again," Shaw said, a hint of reluctant respect in her tone. "You're not under arrest, but from here on, we work together." A flicker of gratitude crossed Michael's face, quickly replaced by determination. "Whatever it takes," he agreed. Their temporary alliance was abruptly solidified by the arrival of an FBI agent responding to Shaw's request for backup, his face etched with urgency. "Agent Shaw, another body's been found, a witness from Victor's bus incident." Shaw and Michael exchanged a glance, understanding the gravity of the situation. It was no longer just about Victor's escape. It was about preventing a meticulously planned series of revenge killings. "Who was it?" Michael said, his voice a mix of fear and grim resolve. Chapter 12: Echoes of a Hidden Agenda. 6 months ago, amid the cacophony of voices and the rumble of the engine, Viktor Kozlov sat inconspicuously on the migrant bus, his eyes scanning the interior with a predator's precision. Every passenger was a chess piece in a game they didn't know they were playing. He had chosen this bus for a reason. It was a direct route to his next objective, a journey planned with meticulous care. As the bus trundled along, a commotion erupted at the front, a squabble over a seat. It was the distraction Victor needed. He leaned forward, his movements deliberate yet discreet, and slipped a small, unassuming chip into the open purse of a woman caught up in the altercation. The act was seamless, unnoticed in the chaos. The chip, no bigger than a grain of rice, was his insurance, a crucial part of the plan known only to him and his distant handlers. The dispute intensified, drawing the attention of the entire bus. Victor's hand moved to his side, subtly checking the concealed knife. He didn't anticipate using it. Violence was a last resort. But as fate would have it, an aggressive passenger, drunk and belligerent, staggered towards him, spewing threats. In a flash, the situation escalated. The drunk man lunged, and Victor reacted. It was over in seconds, a swift, precise movement, and the man crumpled to the floor, lifeless. A collective gasp echoed through the bus as passengers recoiled in horror. Victor's heart rate remained steady, but internally, he cursed the turn of events. This wasn't part of the plan. He was trained to avoid unnecessary attention, and now he was the center of it. As the bus screeched to a halt and law enforcement swarmed aboard, Victor knew his mission had taken an irrevocable detour. In the ensuing chaos, the woman with the purse disembarked, unaware of the valuable and dangerous item now in her possession. As Victor was handcuffed and led away, his thoughts lingered on the chip. Its importance to Operation 120 was paramount. Locked in a cell, Victor replayed the events on the bus. The mission was too important, the stakes too high to be thwarted by this setback. He needed that chip. It was more than a tool, it was the key to a larger plot, one that transcended borders and governments. As the lights dimmed in the prison, Victor received a message from an unknown number. It was cryptic but clear in its intent. The game is not over. Await further instructions. 120, it said. A grim smile played on Victor's lips. The mission was still alive, and he would do whatever it took to see it through. Chapter 13. The Web of Shadows. In the dimly lit back room of an unassuming cafe in Moscow, a group of individuals gathered around a worn oak table. They were not ordinary patrons. Their demeanor spoke of power and secrecy. Each one represented a different facet of the international conspiracy that was slowly unfurling its grip across the globe, particularly in the United States. At the head of the table sat General Amir Hossein, his eyes flickering with a cold intelligence. Next to him was Xiang Li, China's intelligence chief, his face an unreadable mask. Completing the trio was Dmitry Volkov, the Russian cyber warfare strategist, whose fingers tapped rhythmically on the table, betraying a mind always at work. The second wave has begun, Hossein announced, his voice low and steady. Our coordinated efforts are yielding the desired chaos. Xiang Li nodded. In less than 72 hours, we have crippled the West. His gaze fixed on a series of screens displaying various news channels, all reporting the escalating crisis in the U.S. The cyber attacks have crippled their financial systems. Trust in their institutions is eroding. He commends his Russian counterpart. Volkov leaned in, his eyes gleaming with a predatory satisfaction. The power grid failures are just the beginning. Had Victor been in place with his chip, the West's entire communications grid would have been offline by now. But the next phase will push the Americans to the brink. The conversation shifted to the specifics: encrypted communications, coded directives, and the next steps in their elaborate plan. They spoke of leveraging the chaos, of exploiting the vulnerabilities exposed by the attacks. As the meeting progressed, the room was filled with an air of grim determination. These men were not mere spectators. They were puppeteers, orchestrating a downfall that would reshape global dynamics. Outside, the streets of Moscow bustled, unaware of the sinister plot being woven in their midst. The conspirators knew that timing was crucial, and their next moves would have to be precise and ruthless. Chapter 14, Divergent Journeys. In the pulsing heart of New York City, a crowded subway car rattled along its tracks, filled with the sounds of life and movement. Among the throng of passengers was Anna, a young immigrant girl with a brightly embroidered purse clutched tightly in her hands. Her mind was far away, lost in thoughts of a journey that had taken an unexpected turn. Anna had boarded an immigrant bus bound for Washington, D.C. after she crossed the border. She had been eager to start a new chapter in life with her brother, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Without explanation, her bus was rerouted to New York, leaving her stranded and alone, miles away from her intended destination. Now, she found herself navigating the labyrinth of the city's subway system, determined to find a way to cross the vast country to reach her brother safely. The subway car lurched suddenly, a screech of metal on metal piercing the air. Lights flickered and dimmed, casting the car into an eerie semi-darkness. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the passengers as the train ground to a halt, suspended in the dark tunnel. In the suffocating closeness of the stopped subway, panic began to seep in. The car was cast in shadows, the only light a dim emergency glow that did little to dispel the growing fear. Passengers whispered frantically, their voices a low hum of rising terror. "Are the other trains still running?" a woman asked, her voice quivering. "What if they don't know we're stuck here?" "Yeah, what's stopping them from crashing into us?" a young man chimed in, his eyes wide as he looked around the packed car. Another passenger, an older man, tried to offer reassurance despite the uncertainty clouding his own eyes. "They must have emergency systems for this," he said. "Surely they'll stop the trains." But his words did little to calm the nerves of those around him. The possibility of another train, unaware of their stalled car, hurtling towards them in the darkness was a terrifying prospect. Aina, huddled in her seat, clutched her brightly embroidered purse tightly to her chest. It felt like a lifeline, a tangible reminder of her goal to reach her brother. Despite the fear that gnawed at her insides, she remained outwardly calm, a still point in the swirling storm of panic around her. Meanwhile, above ground, Viktor Kozlov stood on the platform of a subway station, his predatory gaze scanning the incoming trains. He was waiting for one passenger in particular, the girl with the purse that unknowingly carried a chip of immense value. The chip was the key to his mission, a mission now jeopardized by the unexpected transportation shutdown. His frustration was a silent, simmering presence as he watched the screens blink with service disruption alerts. The meticulous plans he had laid were unraveling, the chip tantalizingly close yet frustratingly out of reach. He melded into the crowd of confused and concerned commuters, his mind racing to devise a new strategy amidst the chaos. As emergency services began to respond to the crisis, Victor remained a silent, watchful figure amid the worried faces. Below, in the darkness of the subway tunnel, Anna sat unaware of the danger that awaited above, her thoughts fixated on reaching her brother, her grip on the purse unyielding. Chapter 15: Transactions in the Shadows. In the heart of Washington, D.C., the office of Congressman Richard Delgado exuded a sense of understated luxury. Behind the closed doors, Delgado sat at his desk, a sleek, modern affair of dark wood and glass. His eyes flickered with a hint of triumph as he scrolled through a tablet. The screen displayed a recent deposit, $120,000, a sum that brought a sly smirk to his face. This substantial payment was the latest in a series of lucrative transactions, each tied to a simple yet clandestine task: rerouting migrant buses to destinations of his client's choosing. The figure, $120,000, had become a familiar one, a silent testament to Delgado's willingness to bend rules for the right price. 6 months ago, Delgado received a secure, encrypted message from an unknown source. The message was succinct: reroute a specific bus headed for Washington, D.C. to New York instead. No reasons were given, no explanations offered, just the promise of $120,000 upon completion. For Delgado, the decision was made without a second thought. Questions of morality or legality were secondary to the allure of financial gain. In his world, money was the true measure of success, and these transactions were simply business. He recalled authorizing the reroute with a nonchalant air, instructing his aide with a casual wave of his hand. The implications of his actions were irrelevant in the face of the profit they brought. As Delgado leaned back in his chair, he rationalized his actions. He was a man of ambition, climbing the ladder of power. These financial boosts were merely stepping stones. After all, in politics, everyone had a price. His was just higher than most. Delgado's phone vibrates, signaling another encrypted message. He opened it to find a similar request. Another bus, another destination, another $120,000. His smirk widened as he pondered the ease of making money in the shadows of power. But unbeknownst to Delgado, this transaction was more than a routine reroute. It was a cog in a much larger, more ominous machine, one that he was unwittingly helping to turn. Unaware of the true nature of his actions and the danger they posed, Delgado was content in his ignorance, blinded by the glitter of gold. Chapter 16: into the depths. In the dimly lit subway car, halted beneath the streets of New York, unease and whispers swirled among the stranded passengers. The lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the worried faces. In a corner, Anna clutched her purse, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and resolve. She had been so close to a new life with her brother, yet now she felt further than ever, caught in the city's subterranean veins during another inexplicable attack. 42 Ned Street, NY City. Above, at the entrance of the 42nd Street subway in New York City, Viktor Kozlov's impatience was a palpable force. Despite the power outage that had thwarted his plans, his resolve remained unshaken. With a cold, predatory grace, he descended into the darkness, his steps echoing through the empty station, each one bringing him closer to his target, the girl with the flashy purse. Meanwhile, Mike and Agent Shaw, seated near the entrance, grappled with the halted trains, a result of the second wave of transport attacks. Mike's frustration was evident as he spoke. "She was supposed to be in D.C., he said, the worry in his voice unmistakable. "I had arranged for her to stay with my friend till I got out in 36 days, but her bus was rerouted here to New York. Then the attacks happened." Shaw, deep in thought, suddenly made a connection. "What do you mean her bus was rerouted?" she asked, a hint of realization in her tone. "The 120 file," she muttered to herself. Mike, puzzled, looked at her for an explanation. Shaw's focus was now razor-sharp as she turned to him. "It's a case I've been working on," she explained. "Migrants with cell phones texting 120. It seemed to be a code for which bus to get on. We noticed several buses being rerouted, much like your sister's. I thought it was just a transport issue, but then..." She paused, the gravity of the situation dawning on her. "6 months ago, we lost an agent on one of these rerouted buses. It was no accident. He was murdered." The weight of the revelation hit Mike like a ton of bricks. It was all connected. The rerouted buses, the coded texts, the attacks, and now his sister caught in the midst of it all. Determination set in Mike's eyes. "And he's after my sister," he whispered, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "Let's go." Together they stood up, ready to plunge into the depths of the subway, Shaw's gun drawn, to face the danger that awaited them in the darkness. The beam of her flashlight sliced through the blackness, a guide as they ventured into the depths, about to confront a danger far greater than Vic, something that extended beyond their wildest expectations. Chapter 17. Beneath the Surface. In the labyrinthine tunnels beneath New York, Mike and Shaw navigate through darkness, their senses heightened. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the distant echo of their footsteps. Shaw's flashlight, a lone beacon, reveals the gritty details of the subway's underbelly, graffiti-stained walls, the occasional scurry of rats, and the drip of unseen water. Viktor Kozlov, having eluded their immediate grasp, remains a shadow in the darkness, his purpose and destination unknown. As they delve deeper, Mike and Shaw discuss the wider implications of the 120 file, the possibility that Viktor is just a piece in a much larger game, a game where human lives are mere pawns to unseen masters. Mike's thoughts turn to Anna, alone and afraid in the subway, unknowingly holding a piece of this puzzle. As they progress, the signs of recent passage become apparent. Discarded items, a hurriedly dropped piece of paper with scribbled notes in Russian, a sense of urgency in the air. Shaw, trained in observation, notes these signs, understanding that they are drawing closer to their quarry. Suddenly, distant shouts echo through the tunnels, a mix of panic and command. Shaw signals for silence, and they proceed with caution. Peering around a corner, they witness a group of armed men speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Among them, a figure stands out. Not Viktor, but someone else, someone unexpected. Mike and Shaw retreat to the shadows, their minds racing. This development indicates that the conspiracy they are unraveling goes far deeper and is far more dangerous than they imagined. With every step, they move closer to a truth that is as elusive as it is terrifying. In the dark, a realization dawns on them. They are not just chasing a man. They are uncovering a web of intrigue that spans continents. And somewhere in the darkness lies the key to it all, a key that Anna unknowingly holds. Chapter 18. Echoes in the Dark. The stale air of the subway was thick with tension as Shaw and Mike advanced cautiously, The only sounds were their measured footsteps and the distant, unsettling echoes of the abandoned tunnels. Suddenly the silence shattered. Armed men, unexpected and unexplained, emerged from the shadows. Adrenaline surged as Shaw and Mike reacted instinctively, their training taking over. They moved with precision, each movement deliberate, evading and confronting their assailants. In the heat of the moment, Shaw's mind raced. Who were these men? Why were they here? The questions loomed, adding layers to the already complex puzzle they were trying to solve. As the last of their attackers fell, Mike and Shaw exchanged a glance. Their situation was becoming increasingly dangerous, a sign they were getting closer to the heart of the conspiracy. Breathing heavily, they pushed forward. The darkness of the subway seemed to hold secrets, secrets that were slowly unraveling with each step they took deeper into its depths. Shaw's flashlight flickered, casting an eerie glow on the graffiti-laden walls. They had ventured far from the familiar confines of the city above. This was a world unto itself, governed by shadows and uncertainty. As they delved deeper, Mike's resolve hardened. "Whatever we find," he murmured, his voice echoing off the tunnel walls, "we end this." Shaw nodded, her expression steely. They were beyond the point of no return, embroiled in a mystery that was larger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. With each step, they braced for the unknown, prepared to confront whatever lay hidden in the darkness. Chapter 19. The Predator's Game. Viktor Kozlov, once the hunter, now found himself prey in New York's shadowy labyrinth. Who were those men, he wondered? Iranians? They were trying to recover the 120 chip. That means they considered his mission a failure, and there would be consequences. Each step was cautious, calculated. The silent, dark tunnels of the subway were a stark contrast to the chaos he had orchestrated. And now, he was the hunted. As he crept through the darkness, Vic's thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of footsteps. He wasn't alone. With the skill of a seasoned operative, he melted into the shadows, watching. Another group of men, armed and searching, passed by. They were not police. Their movements were too disciplined, too purposeful. As he listened to them speak, he concluded, Iranians. Haunted by the failure of his mission, Vic's mind replayed every move that led him here. He had been so close to success, only to have it slip through his fingers. Now he was not just evading Shaw and Mike, but something bigger, something even he hadn't anticipated. A failed mission. Vic knew he had to stay one step ahead. He couldn't afford another confrontation. Ducking into a service tunnel, he found an old maintenance room. Inside, he paused to think, to plan. He needed a way out, but more than that, he needed leverage. As he pondered his next move, an idea began to form. It was risky, almost desperate, but it was a chance. If he could turn the tables, if he could become the hunter once again, he might yet survive this. Determined, Vic set out, leaving the safety of his temporary hideout. He had a plan, and every second counted. The game was far from over, and Viktor Kozlov was not a man to be underestimated. Chapter 21. The Congressman's Downfall. In Washington, D.C., Congressman Richard Delgado sat in his office, surrounded by luxury but enveloped in anxiety. His burner phone buzzed, a message with only an address and a time. Swallowing hard, he knew this was not a meeting he could avoid. As he left his office, Delgado felt eyes on him. Figures emerged from the shadows, guiding him not with force, but with an unspoken threat. The ride was silent, the tension palpable. Arriving at an unmarked building, Delgado was led into a stark room. The men who faced him were not diplomats or politicians. They were operatives, their cold eyes betraying no emotion. They confronted Delgado with evidence of his involvement in the 120 operation, his collusion with Vic, the rerouting of the buses, his part in a plan that had now spectacularly failed. How I failed? I rerouted the buses for you. I helped you set everything up. And when y'all lost the girl, I found her for you, he admonished them. But he had become a loose end in a game much bigger than himself, a pawn sacrificed by unseen masters. Outside, the night had fallen, casting the city in a mix of shadow and artificial light. Delgado, now a prisoner of his own making, was led through a labyrinth of corridors. His mind raced. Allies he thought he had, plans he had set in motion, all now crumbling like a house of cards. The stark realization hit him. He was not the player but the played, a mere tool in a grander scheme he had only glimpsed. As he was pushed into a cell, his fate unknown. I'm American, you idiots. You can't hold me here, he informed them. The coldness in his captor's eyes said it all. Your country died 2 days ago. Chapter 22. Unseen Burden. In the quiet lobby of FBI headquarters, Shaw and Mike waited anxiously. Anna was being debriefed somewhere beyond these walls, possibly carrying a clue to the entire 120 operation. Mike, restless, broke the silence. What if she's carrying something they want? Shaw pondered. It's likely, but what and why her? Their conversation was cut short as a technician approached, a small sealed bag in hand. We found something in her belongings, he said, his tone serious. What is it? Mike asked, his heart racing. We're not sure yet, but it's encrypted. We'll have more in about an hour. Shaw and Mike exchanged a look, the implications clear. Whatever was hidden within that object, it was the key they had been searching for. Once they know, we'll know, Shaw said, leaning back in her chair, a semblance of calm washing over her. Mike, puzzled, looked at her. What? Shaw repeated, a small smile tugging at her lips. Once they know, we will know. It's something my mentor used to tell me. It means get some rest. There's nothing we can do until they know what's on the chip. Mike nodded, understanding dawning. He leaned back too, trying to find some peace in the waiting, his mind still racing with possibilities. Chapter 23, Vic's Revelation. In the dimly lit back streets of New York, Vic Kozlov moved like a ghost, his mind racing with the gravity of his situation. The chip's secret weighed heavily on him. It was not only a digital key to worldwide pandemonium, but also held a list of 120 sleeper cells, their missions, locations, and members. This chip, meant to be delivered to a Chinese operative 120 days before the attacks, was now in American hands. Recalling the awe at the briefing, Vic felt a gnawing realization that he was just a tool in a larger scheme. He thought of Shaw and Mike, entwined in the chaos he had caused. In an alleyway, contemplating his next move, Vic was suddenly ambushed. A fierce struggle ensued as he fought for his life. He parried and struck with the desperation of a cornered animal, but the numbers were against him. Just as he seemed to gain the upper hand, a sharp pain coursed through his body. A taser. He fell, weakened, the world blurring around him. As he lay on the ground, a small Chinese man stood over him. With a cold, calculated kick to Vic's face, the man signaled the end of the fight. Vic's world faded to black, the last thing he saw being the impassive face of his new captor. 24. Entering the Abyss. In the depths of a secret underground facility in New York, Vic Kozlov rattled the bars of his cell in vain. He surveyed his surroundings, bleak, unyielding, a true dungeon. The congressman in the adjacent cell spoke resignedly. It's no use. I've tried. Vic turned to him. Does anyone know you're here? The congressman shook his head, his expression one of defeat. No, you? No, Vic replied, the weight of their predicament sinking in. They sat in silence, each grappling with the realization that they were alone, abandoned pawns in a game that had moved beyond them. Shaw and Mike stood together, a moment of calm after the storm. Your sentence has been reduced by 36 days, Shaw said, her voice tinged with respect. You've helped us immensely, and you saved my life. Mike, his expression a mix of relief and gratitude, embraced Anna. Thank you, he whispered, his voice barely audible. As they walked away, Mike took Anna's purse, the innocuous object that had sparked this entire ordeal, and quietly dropped it into a nearby garbage can. It was a symbolic gesture, letting go of the past, as they stepped into an uncertain but hopeful future. Check out our other exciting novels, Boardroom Betrayal, series bundle now and save over 20%. Discover what really happened on January 28th, 2022, when Robin Hood took the buy button.